Hey, Made in America listeners. Whether this is your first show or you've been with us for 5 years, thank you so much for joining us. Please spread the word about what we're doing and the great things that are happening in manufacturing with somebody you know.
Hey, it's Ari. Welcome to another episode of the Made in America podcast. Today, I'm with Jill Mayer, CEO of Bead Industries. Jill, thanks so much for coming on again.
Thanks for having me.
It was absolutely my pleasure. I think this is our first in-person episode since 2020.
I know it.
So a lot to catch up on. But since it's the Made in America podcast, and it's certainly been a while, we're going to start off with the same two questions. What do you make, and why do you make it?
And hopefully I'll answer it somewhat differently. Bead Industries is a holding company for Bead Chain, Bead Electronics, and McGuire Manufacturing. Bead Chain is, as you know, our legacy product line where we make metal pull chain for window treatment industry. And our electronic product line is custom electronic components for automotive, lighting, medical. We do some industrial applications. And then our commercial plumbing fixture trim division is McGuire Manufacturing. And so the three together make up Bead Industries, which is a fifth generation family business.
Yeah, 111 years.
111 years.
As of March, which is like super impressive. And love to hear about the why you guys do what you do.
Why we do what we do. Well, my great-great-grandfather started it with his son. And I think, I believe he was really passionate about problem solving and engineering, and it actually was he was working for Westinghouse, and he was solving a problem because they were trying to get chain from Austria, and it was breaking, and it was mostly jewelry type chain, so they needed a stronger chain for the lighting, for the light pole. And so he was solving a problem by designing the machine and making it himself. And I think that sort of problem solving ethos, has been throughout our company. So, and even with our leadership team, everybody loves challenges, problem solving. There's no shortage of them in our business. So if you didn't like that, you wouldn't be there for very long.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I don't think anything survives for that duration of time without something at the core of why and what drives the business,
right,
separate from the product, right? Because no product really survives 111 years.
Correct. And ours certainly have not. We talked a little about evolution of products. So when we started with the chain in the 20s, we got into electronics, the radio vacuum tubes, and which I don't even know what those are.
I was like, how many people are listening to this going like, what's a radio vacuum tube?
I don't know. Google it. And then we got into, in the 50s, and we got into the fluorescent lighting, Sylvania, GE, our pins were in the ends of those. That's gone. We're in some UV light treatments, but nowhere near the scale of the pins we used to produce for GE. And then we got into automotive sensors and control panels, instrumentation. And now we're looking for our next big thing. Honestly, it's time. And we don't know if that's going to be in AI data centers, wearable technology, robotics. Not quite sure, but we know we have to innovate. We're at that sort of pivotal moment in our
the next pivotal moment,
exactly,
right, in the evolution.
Exactly.
Well, I think we've got, as we sort of talked about what we were going to talk about today, I think we have a lot of like really interesting topics to get to.
How are we going to fit them all in?
Yeah, that's going to be that'll be the real challenge. We'll have to have you back for yet another time to get there. But I think let's start with really digging into how you think about building a culture that supports that level of like innovation and ethos. Because look, I know, well, I don't know. Let me ask the question. I sort of sense that, do you find it a little bit of a burden to be thinking about everything that came before you and sort of like that 111 year history? Does that sometimes feel like a burden?
No, it doesn't at all. I think it could for some people. I'm not a past kind of person. I'm a future forward person. So I think it's historical information that's valid and useful, but I don't know that what we did before will be anything like what we're going to do. And I'm sure that when we were evolving back then, we didn't know what the next thing was. And if you look back, like the list I was just sharing, none of those are related. So how did we even get there? I don't know.
Right.
So I'm not sure that it was helpful to know that it's a help or a hindrance to know what we used to do and what we're going to do.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, you're continual focus and leaning into the future, I think is really important. And that must be some type of a legacy, right? Just to your point, everything has continued to change. And the only thing that's been consistent or constant for Bead over the 100+ years has been change.
Right. I mean, I hope I don't have that naive feeling of invincibility where, okay, you know, we got through COVID and I was like, of course we're going to get through COVID. We got through depressions, recessions, all of these things, or at least my, you know,
couple world wars.
Yeah. Not a big deal. But maybe that is a naive way of looking at it. But we have evolved. We have pushed through adversity over the many generations. So it kind of I think both we've built that resilience with our culture and it's ingrained in the culture and historically. But I think we just have this sort of shield around us that we think that it's all going to be okay.
Everything's going to be okay. Because it always has been.
That could be very naive.
That could be.
It's working for us.
It is working for you so far. So you talked about sort of realizing it's time for the next evolution. And, you know, one of the things I've always thought about with this podcast is like helping people learn and grow and develop. And every business needs to continually evolve and change. And so, but change is always difficult, right? So you know, businesses come up with a great winning idea, right? Or let's start with an idea. Then they go to market with it. And market will tell you very quickly if it's a winning idea or not. Well, sometimes a little quickly, yes or no, different ways. But then the idea, let's say, is a winner. Then you take that winning idea and you've got to put structure around it. Because if you don't have sort of structure that helps you to be able to bring it to market, sell it, price it right, deliver it with quality consistently, and continue to do that, the business isn't going to fail. So you build all these systems. You invest all this time and energy.
You go through all these iterations.
You bring in people, and now you're working at it. And I think to the point, every business starts to get, I don't know, I'm trying to remember the word you said.
Say it.
Well, no, you said naivete, I think. No, it's more that feeling of invincibility. Like you've been so successful in what you're doing.
A plateau, really.
Yeah, and it's also hard to know when it's time to change, right? Because the thing, you know, so how do you think about, you've got to a point where you're saying, hey, it's time to evolve again. And the reason I asked is that part of the history, because how did you get to the point of realizing we need to invest and pivot into it, the next evolution?
Well, so aside from, we have a long hallway with patents on the wall. Aside from seeing like the last patent we did was 2010, and that was 15 years ago. So seeing physically, and then, you know, our board members are kind of like, what's next? But we're also seeing, okay, the pipeline looks different. It's closing is taking longer, closing a sale, or areas that we were thriving in, maybe we're not, the margins aren't as high. So I think what it is, it's like a feel, it's a look, it's all of the things sort of piling up together. And, you know, even with your workforce, sort of a lack of inspiration on what it is we're doing, because we're just on a hamster wheel doing the same thing over and over. And when it's working really well and you're in it, you don't think about those things. But then when sort of that flywheel starts to slow, and you know that it's time, it's a gut feeling. It's your people. It's your numbers. It's your leadership. I guess, did that answer?
And is a number more on the growth? I mean, because you guys have work. You know, the business is doing objectively well from like a, you know, profitability, continuity perspective, right? Some people wait too long, right? By the time they're ready to go look out there, everything's falling apart. Margins have fully disintegrated. And then you don't have, you know, I look at profit as sort of dry powder to be able to invest in the next thing.
Right.
And you're in a position, I view as a strong position to be able to make a pivot. A lot of businesses, just looking at what you're looking at, the gauges have gone to empty before they're ready to pivot.
Right. Well, maybe they're ready to pivot. Maybe they've got the cash, but maybe they don't have the expertise, or maybe they don't have a plan. So all of those things obviously have to align. And I think the last 5 years, well, since COVID, since our last podcast, I think we overhauled our systems, we've overhauled our processes, we got involved with EOS, we right people in the right seat, we've got everyone in position, you know, got the leadership team up and running, and it's like, okay, now what's the plan? And then where are the gaps? And so we've done all of those analyses, and it's like we know now what we need to do, and now we have to go execute on it. And that could be the harder part, where you're going to have to lift rocks. You're going to have to see what could work, what couldn't. But I'll give you an example with our electronics division. Our swaging process is an alternative to stamping and machining. Now, we were always faster, more cost effective, all of these things. But we're finding that that as stamping, so we're one of one or two swaging companies in the world. Our process is very proprietary. Stampers are everywhere, and that means that there's automation. So as they're growing and evolving, and we're not, they're doing it more cost effectively, faster, better. So all of the advantages we once had are less and less. And so now we can either change our process, automate more. As a small business, we probably can't automate as fast as we would like to, and probably not at the pace that stamping has been automating. But what we can do is say, all right, where are the pockets where there's still advantages? And one of those would be high cost materials. Because if our process means less scrap, then what type of materials, where if there was less scrap, would be a huge cost savings to customers. So then it's like, okay, we need to be in defense, aerospace and defense, because those are high cost, high advanced materials. So that's one area we're starting to dig into, is advanced materials. So something like that would be an example of why we're watching the competition kind of, I don't know, they're hot on our tail.
Right.
Sorry, I don't know.
That's fine. And so no, that I think that's really, it's really just about making sure that you've got people in a position to look at it from that perspective, right? And so is that your role at the company, to take a step back and look at that?
Absolutely. And so my role is to fill our leadership team with the experts to go do that. I don't know how to do it, but I know a guy or a gal. I know what we need to do, and I can get the team excited about it. And so I look at myself as resource allocation. So I'll find the capital, I'll find the resources, I'll find experts that can help, or consultants, or anything that we need to get where we need to go. But most importantly is our team, and giving them what they need to grow and evolve. And a lot of times they have the ideas, we just need to flush them all out, and I can help with that too. So, and I know we'll probably get into this, but my culture index profile is like, I'm the type of person who throws a bunch of stuff at the wall to see what sticks until we get it right. And so I can go all day long and do that until we find something that will work. And then I've got a leadership team that can execute on, okay, this works, great. Then we're going to go do this, this, and this, and get after it. Basically.
Which, by the way, I think some people undervalue the need to have someone who's willing to just keep throwing spaghetti at the wall until we see what sticks. Right. Yeah, whatever. It's not bad. So let's actually pivot to that culture index, because I know that you talked about putting the right people in the right seats, which is like a business axiom that's talked about all the time, but easy to say, hard to do. So tell us a little bit about kind of your journey on thinking about it and what you're using to help you do that.
Sure, absolutely. So we're all used to the assessments, Myers-Briggs, DISC, all of that. Culture Index is more about your natural behavioral traits that you're born with. And then, and I think DISC has a lot to do with skills and experience. I'm not quite sure, but Culture Index is super simple. It's basically A, B, C, and D are the letters, and it's the gas pedal, which is autonomy, the brake pedal, which is conformity to rules and process, and then there's pace, and then there's social. And we started using Culture Index in conjunction with EOS because we were looking for specific types of hires, and we were trying to increase the success rate of some of our hires. We were hiring people and they weren't working out. And that obviously takes a lot of time and effort, not just from the team, but also time, right? And then you got to go back to the drawing board and hire again. So we were trying to close the...
It's not just the hire too, right? You brought them in to do something. If it didn't work out, that probably means whatever they were doing went in a direction that wasn't in alignment to what you wanted, or down to a dead end or whatever. So now you've got to reverse back out of there and get someone else going. So it's a lot.
Well, and it's true. And there's only so much that a resume and a job interview can tell you about a person. So you can do all these fancy assessments and it'll say that they're this, this, and this, but this assessment, it's data driven. It's super straightforward. I'd like to preface this with, I am not a certified expert in this.
Mileage may vary.
I'm an amateur Culture Index user. But I took a workshop and it's just already proven it. When we do assessments for our existing folks and for future folks, it honestly feels like we are reading tarot cards, because it says exactly what this person's natural behavioral traits are. Now, can someone's natural behavioral trait be that they prefer to work in a focused, quiet environment on their own, but they spent their whole lives, leading teams and not being an individual contributor. Yes, it's absolutely possible. This is just nature.
Made in America is brought to you by Compass MSP, the leader in IT services. The Compass MSP way is the combination of our standards, people, tools, policies, and techniques that result in a unique approach to managing our clients' IT needs. Find out how Compass MSP can boost your operations, improve your security, and more with our comprehensive IT managed, co-managed, and cybersecurity and compliance services. Visit us at compassmsp.com.
And so in my nature is to problem solve, get excited about challenges, throw pasta at the wall to see what sticks, and also delegate and try to and be conceptual about possible opportunities. Sometimes when we think of, okay, what are these amazing things we can be doing? When you're painting a vision as a visionary, which you are as well, it's hard to get people on board because you sort of have to be conceptual, thinking about what the future could hold. We talked about this too, not everybody, I've assumed that everybody also could do that, but really that is a specific trait. I think there's 9 traits in the culture index. But so basically we're using it for hires, we're using it for managing our existing employees, and it's actually been really incredible.
So let me just, we're going to dig into that for a second. I just want to pull on something that you said before, which I think is really true. And it seems to be across the board with almost everybody that I know, is we undervalue the thing that we're good at and do because we think it's easy. And then we think everyone else can do it because it's easy for us,
right,
which is totally not the case. And what's easy for us is often hard for somebody else, and
right,
vice versa. And that goes back to the right people in the right seats, right?
Exactly. Especially with focus tasks or switching gears a lot. Some people can do that. Some people can't. Some people can and shouldn't, right?
Right.
And I'm trying to think of some of the other, at how you influence others, persuasion versus sort of more direct command and control. Yeah. So all of those things, knowing that about your boss or your direct reports will help you communicate with them better. So at the very least, you're communicating with your folks better. So far with our hires, it's been a great tool. Now, keep in mind that this is one tool for the hiring process, not the only tool or the driving force, but it's definitely a good data point to have when you're hiring.
Look, I always think of hiring is like speed dating to a marriage, right? You get a resume, which is a profile basically, right? And who knows, it's always going to be written in a way that looks the best for the candidate, which is maybe intentionally misleading. Maybe we just review it and take away something that's not quite right, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Then we meet them couple of times maybe, and then they meet with the rest of the team or some group of the team one time for 30 to 60, maybe 90 minutes on a big hire.
Yeah.
And then we're making a decision.
We're we'd like to spend the rest of our days with you.
Exactly.
It's really odd if you think about it.
It is very odd. I don't know if there's a better way to do it, but that's it. So before I want to ask you a bunch of questions on Culture Index, are there other stuff that you've used in the past that you either from an assessment perspective that you continue to use, or you're hey, now that we're using this, we've really way downplayed DISC, for example, which I know is something you brought up?
Yeah, no, I'm not opposed to DISC. I think it's more of a sales tool, but it can be used in other ways. I liked Strength Finder.
Yep.
Have you done Strength Finder?
I have in the past.
The whole premise behind that was basically it's way easier to improve your already existing strengths than it is to try to improve a weakness. Mm-hmm. We have diverse leadership teams so that you can fill in for my weakness.
That's right.
So I thought that was a really interesting tool. I don't know that it's a game changer the way that Culture Index has been for us. And it dovetails nicely into EOS, which is right person, right seat, and all of the things, accountability and all of the things, your core values that you develop with EOS that you're trying to make sure that your the folks that you hire are aligned with. And so that can help guide and so you set up a culture profile for each job post or each job description. And then candidates that come in, take the assessment, takes 2 minutes, and then you can see where they rank. So Susan gets a 20% match, Jerry is an 80% match. You might say, I'll interview candidates if they're 50% and above. I mean, like I was mentioning before we started, we were looking for a trailblazer salesperson. It was really hard to find, so we did lower the match percentage on that. But you're a trailblazer. If you want to come work,
I feel like I'm getting recruited here. So sounds like you've really bought into this. Let's kind of put some meat on the bone around how you use it. So I don't know if there's maybe like a success story that you want to share of like where you felt like, hey, we were struggling to fill this role. We leveraged culture index and then we got something good out of it. If that's something we can do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Publicly. Yeah.
So we've had, in the last 4 or 5 years, we've had 4 operations managers.
Yep. And what's an operations manager do?
So our director of manufacturing / operations manager basically manages our production planner, our production supervisor, our shipping area, basically makes sure that we're managing customer satisfaction, but also making sure we're making the products out on the floor quickly, timely.
They're the orchestrator that needs to make sure all the different pieces from like inception of the order out the door and shipping all kind of come together in a way that the customer expects. So they're big orchestrator.
It's basically everything. And then everybody
of the whole orchestra.
And everything else is ancillary support staff. So
right.
Customer service, sales, marketing, that's all. Accounting, all of that supports what we're doing, which is making the product.
Yep.
So it's a very important role. And we tried a number of different ways. We had some great employees in the role, but for whatever reason, we couldn't make it work, or it wouldn't stick. We had a great employee that came, but then wanted to retire early. We threw him into retirement. We had another employee that was a great employee, but maybe it wasn't the right fit.
Sure.
Just all of the things that you can think of, and it was really frustrating. And I think the team was.
Wit's end.
Yeah, wit's end.
How many times are we going to try and do this thing and we're not going to get it right? Yeah.
I basically was like, all right, I'm taking over the hiring of this position, rolled up my sleeves, was like, we're going to do culture index. And then I worked with our culture index consultant to develop the profile.
So let's talk about that. What does that look like?
Because I was new with culture index, I didn't even, know how to properly set up the profile. You actually get a chance to do it, and then they'll go over it with you, and you're like, that's not what I want at all. But one of the things I wanted, which we've always wanted for that role, is a very proactive person. I don't want to just this role isn't putting out fires. This isn't a,
reactive role.
Yeah, a reactive role. You're putting out fires. You're basically like, we didn't make that part in time. You're going over here. You're working with, it's all management of the folks. And I think that we said, we want this person to be reactive or proactive. We want this person to be thinking about the type of equipment we're going to need, making sure that all the equipment's up and running, that the right people are working on the right things. And we set up this profile. We got 100% match. The person came in, interviewed well, and he's been there for 8 months, and he's fabulous.
So let's talk about this profile, because I think something that I've seen happen, and when I say I've seen it, it means I've done it, which is I start to sit down and be like, what do I want? And I want everything, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, I want them to be able to be proactive. I want them to be great in front of people. They got to be great reading the numbers, got to be super comfortable. Like
it's a unicorn. They don't exist.
Yeah, exactly. They need to be able to go up, down, left, right, all at the same time.
For sure.
So
you have to choose.
Right. So how do you think about priorities? Because you said something earlier, which I think is super true, right? We really need to be focused on getting people with the right strengths and supporting them in even being stronger in those key areas. And they need to just be like passable at some of these weaknesses, right? I mean, you can't have a weakness counterbalance a strength. So you got to pass.
Sure.
But they don't need to spend a lot of time on those. What we need to do is bring someone else in whose strength is their weakness, and then together they're the whole package. But how do you think about in this role, or more broadly, like, I can't have everything. Like you can't find the unicorn person who wants to do everything. So does your consultant help you like rein in that desire? Was that something you had to do yourself? How did that work?
Yeah, I mean, I'm better at it now, but my consultant had to be like, you're asking for the moon and the sun. And then it's sort of like, what are the top 2? And then here's what you could probably get more with that type of a personality. And then when we had candidates come in that didn't match but had phenomenal resumes, I was kind of like, but are you sure? Like maybe that they're, you know,
I could change them.
Or it was like, maybe they can still do the role just differently. And then he would say, you know, he would see that, okay, the pace is here, conformity to process is here. And it's like, you really want someone in that role following the process. You want somebody to go at a faster pace. You don't want them to be paralyzed by data, right? You want them to use data, but not be just
Slave to it.
exactly. So once he explains what you're giving up, or what you have to give up in order to get what you really want, then you're okay with it. So
Yeah,
that's what we
because
did.
every sort of skill comes at I don't know if the expense is the right word, but at the expense of another skill. So if someone's going to be comfortable getting to 80% of the data and running fast, then you have to give up someone who's really interested in digging deep into the data.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
Like I was saying before, how I'm always trying different things, and I'm always bringing these harebrained ideas to my team, and some of them really work well, and some of them don't, and some of them become a bit of a distraction for them. So my team will be like, you know, maybe it's a great idea. We're not probably ready to dive into that right now. So, for example, EOS was a big win. Before EOS, I was bringing in consultants for different things because I knew that we had a process problem. I didn't know how to solve it. So when we finally got to EOS, what did we try before EOS that was a huge failure? Oh, I know what. We were trying to, so we had a new ERP and we weren't getting what we wanted out of it. So we tried to put Power BI over it. So when the data isn't right, adding another layer is
Another BI tool.
surprisingly that didn't work. So after that failure and kind of a disaster waste of time, my team was kind of like, what's EOS? Here we go again. But it clicked. So then I built the credibility where like, yes, sometimes I bring great ideas, sometimes I don't, but you have to try to execute them and tell me if they're going to work or not. So there's pros and cons to me as well. So there's pros and cons to every single position. There's, and especially with your technical folks, they can be amazing at telling you if you can do a particular custom job that we're not sure we can do, or figuring it out if we're pretty sure we can't, but they somehow figure out that we can do it. But communicating that to the customer sometimes isn't their forte.
Yeah. So you might need someone who's going to be able to be the face in the communication of the organization, as well as someone who's doing the technical
Exactly.
work, and not make them both be the same person.
Right. I mean, sometimes they can be.
Sometimes.
And that's exciting. But
that is exciting. Yes, in my business, we look for those people all the time.
Yeah.
Hard to find,
Yes.
but they're good to find when you have them. So let's do a little bit on EOS, because you've mentioned it a few different times. And actually, going back to our last episode 5 years ago, you had just sort of got on the EOS train. So a lot of people know what it is, but just to make sure we don't leave anybody behind, just if you could just do a quick primer on what EOS is.
Sure. So EOS stands for Entrepreneurial Operating System.
It's a hard word to say.
Yeah.
Five times fast, yeah.
And it's basically like it's the way you run every single meeting in every single department. So I'll give you an example. Before EOS, we had everybody in the room from our entire office in a meeting for something that half of them didn't need to be there. We didn't have an agenda. Nobody knew it. And then 3 hours later, we're leaving the room. What are the action items? What did we even discuss? So it just felt disorganized, but we were all obviously doing the best we could. EOS just put structure around your existing business model. So we already have to solve challenges of our particular product, our particular market, in personnel, workforce development, training. We already have to do all of those things. But if your department heads are running a meeting the same way at the same time, using metrics in a scorecard that's like fairly regimented, you can't have 42 metrics. So EOS sets it up so that it's really structured and it's really standard across all the departments. And that is what has saved us time. Because if we're all doing things the same way, then we can be more effective and efficient. And the other thing that EOS is strong with is cascading the messages down throughout the organization. So if the leadership team decides we're going to do X, Y, and Z, department heads are privy to that information, and they're taking it down to their folks as well. they're all getting the same message. It's not telephone, that game telephone when you hear it 4 different times, different ways. So the same message is being passed through the organization. So it's crystal clear to everybody in the company where we're going and what we're doing. And that transparency is huge, especially for the next generation of workers. They want to know what's going on.
Made in America is brought to you by Compass MSP. As a national leader in cybersecurity and IT services, Compass MSP is dedicated to helping businesses like yours achieve a competitive edge through the strategic use of IT technology. Our mission is to support you in reaching your business goals, and we are committed to being your partner in this journey. Visit us at compassmsp.com.
You're not going to tell
next
them.
generation, you lettered me in like the Gen Z or whatever.
Yeah. Gen
yeah.
Z. Who's after Gen Z?
Alpha.
Gen Alpha,
We're
Beta.
starting alpha. We're starting over again from the
Yeah,
beginning
yeah.
of the alphabet because by the time we get
Well, why did we
27
start
years-
at the end anyway?
I have
That was
no
foolish.
idea. Yeah, I had no idea how that all happened. Separate episode. We'll have to Google that.
Yeah.
So the entrepreneurial operating system is something giving you a way to provide a sort of structure for running the business, try and make you more efficient from a meeting standpoint. So you've been at it for 5 years. I guess you're still at it, so that must mean you're seeing that it's helpful.
Yes, and we have a facilitator for our quarterly offsite meetings, and we thought eventually that we'd let that go and we'd be on our way. But it's really nice having a third party facilitate the full day offsite meetings with the team, just so they can kind of keep the flow going, keep everybody on track, making sure everybody has a voice, all that kind of thing. So you've got your annual planning 2-day, your quarterly sessions, and then your weekly L10 meetings. And that's their meeting structure. You don't have to meet every day, 5 times a week. And you don't have to go on these massive, expensive retreats. You just really need to get out of the office, although we have been lacking for office space and just done it in our own conference room before. So
Right. And so that's been really helpful to have you feel like the organization has a level of like structure and accountability towards the big picture goals.
Yeah, and there's a cadence. And I guess, so your question was, we're still doing it. Why? Because there's a cadence to it. And it feels like it takes all of that complication out so that each quarter we're like, these are the rocks we want to do. We're hyper focused on the few things we want to kick down. So when we do our annual planning, we say we need to do all these things this year. And then we get into our quarterly sessions and we say, okay, what do we need to do this quarter in order to meet our annual plan? And the annual plan is based on your 10-year. So you have this crazy goal, but you break it down into these bite-sized chunks and it doesn't feel that crazy. And the real amazing part is when folks start to see that you're actually moving towards that goal slowly but surely. So 5 years in, and we're like, we are not just on this hamster wheel feeling like our efforts are useless. There's no process. There's no structure. There's so many challenges. We're never going to figure them out. I mean, anybody who's been at a business where your folks are still talking about the same issue for 2-3 years in a row that will resonate with them, because it gets to a point where if we're in 2 quarterly sessions and we're still talking about an issue, all right, we're going to fix it right here and now, because this is not how EOS is supposed to work.
And do you credit the facilitator with like helping? Let's just take a step back and acknowledge that I think everyone's either in their own business at a period of time sort of gone into that, hamster wheel, or been involved in a business in the hamster wheel where you feel like the same big problems keep coming back up and aren't like fully getting solved. And you always want to find a way to solve them. And do you find that having that facilitator is the thing that helps you see the outside piece, or is it the structure or combination?
I think the facilitator has got to be 75% of it, because we did try to do EOS on our own and we sputtered out. And then we tried it again with the facilitator and we took off. And I will say that what the facilitator will do, it's called IDS, identify, discuss, solve. 90% of the problem is you're not identifying the right problem. So if you go right into solve mode and you haven't identified the problem, you're basically solving one of the symptoms of the problem. And so it really helps you with clarity of the actual problem. And so the facilitator has to be like, is this the right problem? Is this the right problem? Until you're blue in the face and you're like, okay, this is the problem. And now let's solve it. And the solving part actually takes the shortest amount, believe it or not.
Yeah. I mean, look, that's
once you've identified it.
I'm just fully connecting with this idea that in life in general, we often move very too quickly to solve, whether that's personal relationships, like with your kids, with your marriage, with friends, with family, and certainly in business, like the desire to like either not have to go the uncomfortable digging.
Yeah.
Because it can be uncomfortable, right? I mean, it's uncomfortable in the group because you want to be careful not to be casting blame, but you got to ask probing questions to go deep, and people can get uncomfortable with that.
Right.
Whereas if you just quickly go to the surface solve, everyone sort of initially feels better, but long term, you're just back.
For sure. And you bring up a good point, because I think starting EOS, for folks should know that it's very uncomfortable in the very beginning, but then you really don't have that moving. I mean, you're going to have uncomfortability, but it does dial it back hugely, because you get all the uglies out, and then you're working on the stuff that really matters and moves the needle. And it's really refreshing not to be bogged down in petty things, because you've already fixed that. Well, because once you start out with EOS, you're setting the accountability chart and everybody's owning their seat. So there's none of this when you're solving the problem. If there's any of that, then you didn't do this part right.
right.
So the beginning stages are the hardest, but then once you're rocking and rolling, you're good. And so our team over at McGuire, our commercial plumbing division, they love EOS. I mean, they have, there's an even smaller crew over there. Like I said before, departments of one, we don't have the bandwidth to be dealing with all sorts of issues or being reactive to things. So it's just incredible when I'm sitting in on these meetings and I'm seeing all of the goals that we're crushing for the full year, and we're doing it with that few people, with that few resources, and moving the business forward. We're probably going to be selling into India pretty soon. We went there to source product, and now we're going to be selling into India,
Right, well,
which is
know,
like a huge growing
like,
market right now.
You know, Joe, we do all this prep, and then you like hold all this great information. We'll get back to that in a second. Oh, that's great. And I'll just leave it back at this, which I think is oftentimes people can feel like I see there's a lot of things people don't spend money on, which I think makes no sense. Like in our business, I feel like we talked actually about this on the last podcast, believe it or not, which was you buy an ERP or you buy any technology and then you skimp on the training.
Yeah.
And it's like, it would be like buying a brand new car, but not learning how to drive.
Yeah.
It's like you sort of figure it out. Meanwhile, it's like a manual. So you're grinding the gearbox. And that's why everyone, years on from a lot of technology stuff goes, oh, we're only using 20% of what we bought because we didn't invest in the training. And I feel like with EOS, it's sort of similarly, like if you sort of skimp on getting the outside support, it's going to be really hard. And we've all learned that the hard way. And I think you're sort of saying the same thing, which is having someone from the outside does a few things. I'll put it on the table for you to either agree or disagree. But one is, if they're not there, that means Jill or someone else has to not only participate, but also facilitate. And it's hard to be like on top of it and in it at the same time.
For sure. And I want to be in a support role to the team. I don't want to be in a, I don't want to be shortening what they're saying or guiding them or I don't want to facilitate the direction they want to speak to. I want to be involved in that discussion with them. So
especially because sometimes it's hard to speak truth to the boss. You know what I mean? Like it is. I
don't know. My team's pretty comfortable. We speak some truth. I like it.
Yeah, I love it too. I think sometimes like I'll even speak for myself. Like I think actually you had me do the culture index and that was super fun. Thank you for letting me do that.
Sure.
So I got to learn and experience it. And I will say that one of the things it asked was like, would I describe myself as approachable? I would describe myself as very approachable and like inside my mind, I'm super approachable. And I find that after people do approach me, they're always like feeling good about it. But when I ask other people, they're like, dude, you're super hard to approach, like, right? Like it's very scary.
I don't think you are either, but does anyone actually think they're not who would think?
But that's why I'm saying about these facilitators. Yeah. My experience is having a third party facilitator not only allows me to participate strategically, right? Like I don't want to monopolize the conversation,
right?
But you can't be a facilitator and a participant. It's just not really practically possible. But I think that's helpful. And the other thing that I found helpful when you use a third-party facilitator in meetings is like that person is outside of the thing. So they bring a perspective, which is super helpful. And when you're doing an EOS type of an item or some level of structure, they hopefully bring the expertise on the structure. So help us use the tool. But the team also, I think, tends to be less uncomfortable sort of like speaking to them than if I or you are facilitating. And it might, by the way, it might only be a 10% difference in
Sure.
comfortability. But
it's
when
there.
you're trying to dig in to find the problem, that 10% can be the difference between getting to the root problem or just
Well, even if they are incredibly comfortable coming to me, it is another avenue. Just like when salespeople use social media or a phone call or email, or you kind of have to go at prospects all different angles because everybody has a different way they like to do things. So a facilitator is just one more way, I think, that we add. And like you said, some people might be fine approaching me, other people may not, and the facilitator's there. The other thing too, the facilitator helps with making sure everybody gets about the same amount of airtime. Otherwise, I could be there taking over and you not know it because I'm just excited about something we're working on. So I think it's good, or may notice that somebody hasn't been participating. And so we have full participation and everybody's feedback, and such a diverse thought group too that helps make it fun.
I 100% agree. And facilitator, a good one, should be doing all that, and it's definitely worth it. So,
and you should use culture index to make sure that everyone on your team isn't the same person, because I said I had that hire that was wonderful. They happen to have my same culture index, and I was like, oh no, I hope I'm not just hiring like a mini me.
Yeah. Well, we do.
Which nobody wants to do that,
No.
but I think we tend to like folks that are like-minded, or like working with folks that are like-minded, but you need that diversity of that. But I also love working with, like my CFO is completely opposite from me. More focused, more likes the detail, obviously can do analysis, different things, and get deep in there and then come back. And I really prefer a succinct overview, highlights. She knows when she sends me reports that she'll send them to me, but then we'll walk through them, or she'll skip over it and just go right to the bullet items, because I just don't have the attention span for it.
I completely understand
Yes.
what you're saying. So I want to pivot to two quick more topics. One, we talked about the last time, how after you and your husband got involved in the business, you brought down the average age, and then over the years, you'd really worked at, bringing in the next generation of people into the business, which is something that manufacturers across Connecticut and frankly across the United States are facing, right? Because there's a giant gap, 10, 20 years where we really didn't put a lot of new people into manufacturing. And so there's just this big age gap. And when we talked last time, I think you had said the average age had been brought down to, into the mid 40s.
Lower than that, actually. I think it's high 30s.
Well, that's even lower than it was 5 years ago, which is what I was going to ask you.
Yes.
And so I think you reminded me of this because when you said EOS is helping you communicate to the next generation. So I would just ask to briefly just touch on, you had success bringing people in. Are you having success keeping them, right? Because another thing I hear from manufacturers is, we get the young people in, but then they move on to something else, or they go to another manufacturer and sort of blah, blah, blah. And if so, how you are being successful at getting them in there.
We had, obviously with COVID, there was the great resignation. We had a lot of retirees.
Yep.
We had wonderful young folks come in, and we did lose quite a few. And I think anyway that we've figured it out. And one of the things that I've noticed is that if we have a mentor or a manager for them that is growing them internally, receiving their feedback, passing it along to the leadership team, and then as we continue to be transparent with EOS, the more transparent we are, the more feedback we gather from them, whether or not we act on it. And if we're not going to act on it, here's why we didn't act on it. You can't just take feedback and be like, that's a really great point, and then just not do anything with it. Because that's actually even more frustrating than not getting the feedback. Yeah. And I think the other piece is that they want to do their job. So I know that nobody likes a micromanager, that's obvious, but a lot of the times when somebody mentors someone, here's how I do it, this is the way I do it, most of the time they need your guidance, they'll come to you. But I think letting folks kind of do it their way. So we're transparent, they're doing it the way they want to do it. It might not be the way that I would do it, but are they meeting their metrics, and are they meeting their goals, and are they getting it done, and is customer satisfaction high? Then I don't think it matters that it's not done my way. And I think we used to put a lot of weight on doing it a certain way. And especially now with AI and all of the new technology coming out, Our young folks have so many good ideas on how we could do something better. I'll give you an example. We had our machine operators were telling our tool makers, okay, machines are down, or this machine is down, or I don't have any material, or whatever it was. And for the machine operators, they felt like they went to the people, the right folks, and made their case. To the tool makers, they were kind of like, we know, we'll get to it, or we heard you and we did fix it. I mean, nobody knew where the breakdown was. So we put up QR codes on the machines, and then passed out, some old phones so they can scan it, and it'll drop down, say what's the issue, because we do have older machines out there, so it's drop down what's the issue and when did you request it, and so now we can track who had the issue, when they sent it, and how long it took for them to get. Now, if our tool makers didn't get to it, maybe it's because they're swamped with, all the other things, but fine, okay, then we have a gap here. So rather than try to figure out he said, she said, it's a little bit more on tracking the issues and making sure that we're responding in a way. So that was an idea from the floor.
From the floor.
So, when you're listening to these ideas, it's like, okay, we've tried that, we've done that, but how do you think we should do it? Well, if we did QR codes, it would be easier and we could track it. Fine, let's try that. And it's been working.
I gotta be honest, it doesn't feel like, I know a lot of people, and maybe I'm under oversimplifying, let me say it like that. But I feel like, people talk about that, like this idea of, hey, people want to be heard. They want to be able to do something in a way they find to be efficient. They want to feel like empowered. They want to see like a future. Is that different than when we were kids?
It's not, and I do feel like every generation is annoyed by the generation below them. But I do think that the way that it comes off, I think the way that maybe our generation hears it is that they want to be promoted every 6 to 12 months. Mm-hmm. They want more money. They want they don't want the responsibilities, but they want, a seat at the table. And really they when you break it down, they really just want to know what's the plan, what's going on, and what are we going to do to solve it, and can I help? If they know what their impact is, they're going to be way more inspired and fulfilled and excited to be a part of it. Or like we had just said it, but if they give their feedback and then you tell them why that's not going to work, but that's great feedback, now they know, but not feeling like they can provide that feedback. And we have this expression too that we say, no good deed goes unpunished, right? Because it's like you can do something really awesome. We'll get breakfast sandwiches for everyone. Great job. And then they'll be like, well, bagels or pizza would have been better. You know what I mean? So it's like sometimes you just do the best you can and you're not going to please everybody. But for the most part, I think they like being a part of the plan and understanding it, and it comes off a little bit like they want to be running the company. Right. But I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, I somehow think it's often not that different, and if we just sort of put ourselves in their shoes at the time and would have felt very similarly. But I'm glad that you're having the success with it, and I think people will learn and take from that. I want to ask you about the selling into India, so say more.
Okay, so we were over there, our folks were over there sourcing some products for our plumbing industry. And obviously India is the new China with how the growth and the trajectory of the buildings and the construction that's going on over there. So it was something that we've been looking into, done a couple trips, and there's going to be a window of time where we still need to research and explore and do more and setting it up. But I think it could be a great place to start. And I was talking with the team, and they're saying, okay, would Canada or Mexico be an easier place to start? And actually it wouldn't, because those markets are saturated. Yeah. So maybe India, as vast as it is, would be a cool place to start. Doesn't work out, okay, we cut our teeth selling internationally, but for electronics, we sell internationally. For Maguire, we just sell to Canada. So this would be new for us. So it's something that I think it's worth checking out. It's kind of exciting. It's risky, but at the same time, it's like, that's fun stuff.
Well, I think we're going to end it on saying this, which is that not as fast as you think, actually. We just had a good time talking. But I think that to me is like the ultimate ethos that drives a great business, which is this idea that no matter what we've done in the past and where we've been, we got to continue to take risks and try new things. And obviously that's what you're doing there. And I think that's what's going to make Bead successful for the next 5, 10, 110 years.
I hope so.
Yeah,
We'll have fun trying anyway.
let's make it happen. And I appreciate you recruiting me. That was very flattering. All right, Jill, thanks so much for coming on. I
Thank
really,
you,
really
Ari.
appreciate it.
This is awesome.
Made in America with Ari Santiago is brought to you by Compass MSP.